Let's go to my first guest on the program this afternoon, Nationals MP Keith Pitt, of course, joining us as usual from up his way in Bundaberg. Thanks very much for your time, Keith Pitt. What do you make of the Prime Minister's decision to return early from Hawaii?
Well, the Prime Minister has put out a statement today where he's apologised if individuals were offended at the fact he took a break of a few days with his family. He'll be returning at the first opportunity, and I understand he's done some media this morning. But you know, in his defence, Tom, he is in a role where his responsibilities are never ending and they never go away. He's been in constant contact with shareholding ministers and others. You know, in the modern world, you are always connected and you're certainly always informed.
Yeah, you are, and he's got to take a holiday sometime. I suppose the issue seems to have been wanting to go away on holiday on the quiet without the usual sort of mechanism of official release. Michael McCormack's taking the reins and so on. Is that fair enough that people want to be informed and you've got to be entirely transparent?
Look, the world's full of critics, Tom. You know, the reality is that my understanding it was planned that we'd take some leave with his family in January. Some things came up, particularly around India and Japan and Modi and Abe. They moved and made a quick decision to try and get a couple of days away. I don't think that's unreasonable. And certainly when your family's younger, it's more difficult than when they're adults. And that time is incredibly valuable. But he's always been connected. He still knows what's going on. He's kept a watching brief over everything. And once again, I don't think too many of your viewers would be that upset that he's taken a few days with his family. And there are plenty of responsible people around who are in those senior positions who are out there doing their job.
Are people hyperventilating a bit?
Well, look, I'll let the commentators make their comments, but as the Prime Minister of Australia, there are always challenges, particularly in this time of year, whether that's fires, floods, cyclones, or the ongoing drought. You always have Defence Force personnel who are on deployment. It is a job which is constant, never goes away. And the reality is I think he's doing a good job, and I certainly think that he is allowed to have some time with his family, as many others would. But once again, he's made the decision to return. He'll be back on the first opportunity.
Let's look at the situation more broadly. So Australia's always been a country, obviously, in drought and fires. We know that that's indisputable. What's happening at the moment seems to be an insight into the new norm, possibly ahead in many years to come, even in a few years to come with climate change. What some Australians seem to be wondering, Keith Pitt, is if we're going to be badly affected by what's happening in the climate in Australia, why at international climate meetings are we not trying to really drive ambitious deals, instead sitting back? Do you understand that concern?
Well, firstly, Tom, we're doing what we said we would. We have a proportionate response. And let's face facts here. We could move the entire population of Australia, all 25 million of us, shut down our entire economy, shift to New Zealand, and it wouldn't change the world's temperature. So we are doing our part. We need to protect our own economy. The things that we do certainly can't smash jobs and our local economy. So it's a matter of being a participant proportional to our contribution to emissions. That is exactly what we are doing. If you look back in time, Tom, I mean, I talked to Bill Trevor. Bill's the Deputy Mayor up here in Bundaberg. Multiple generations of the Trevor family have lived over at Childers. And he tells me of his grandfather speaking to him about the Federation drought that ran for more than 10 years. And the description he always gave was the number of cattle that were left. You could stand under the shade of one tree. So I think, as you've said, this is a land which changes constantly in terms of climate. So what we need to do as government is ensure that we build infrastructure which helps with resilience. So that means more dams, more connecting pipelines and infrastructure. Certainly, bigger fire breaks, hazard reduction burning, all the things that actually reduce risk.
Absolutely, and they all seem to be things on the cards. I think perhaps we need to even relook the way we do hazard reduction burns, considering it appears to be warmer in some of those winter months. But the other big ticket item, as I said, are these global deals. Of course Australia can't change the climate, that's obvious. But again, clearly Australia isn't trying to drive more ambitious change. The Paris target's not going to be met with the current commitment, including that from Australia, and Australia's not trying to drive a more ambitious deal. That in of itself is evident, isn't it?
Oh, Tom, I think you make my case for me. We are reacting proportionate to our contribution. We're delivering on what we committed to for the 2030 target. We expect that to be exceeded by about 16 million tonnes. So we are doing our part, and we're a very small contributor to world emissions. But once again, we expect others to do what they've said that they would, and I look forward to seeing those changes occur.
Let me put it this way. What would you say to voters who recognise Australia is a small player in overall emissions, but is going to be harshly affected by the change and wants us to drive a more ambitious deal, to be a front runner?
Well, once again, I mean, the government's position is to take a balanced proposition. We can't destroy our own economy, turn all of our own people out of a job on the back of a decision which won't affect the climate or the temperature around the world. There is one globe. The emissions are all in one bucket. Yes, we do want others to meet their targets.
You keep saying won't affect it. I'm completely accepting the point. 1.3% of emissions. On board. We're in furious agreement there. The other question is whether we could be at the talks at the front of the pack, trying to drive more ambitious deals. We're not. What do you say to voters who would like us to be in that role?
Well, Tom, I'd ask you, what is it you're suggesting that we do? We took a proposition to the Australian people at the election. We're delivering on that proposition. We are meeting our commitments. We're doing exactly what we said we would. And the Australian people made a decision at the last election not to go out with those what I'd call outrageous targets set by Mr Shorten, completely uncosted.
There's a huge gap,
want to do that.
Keith Pitt, between the 26 Australia's on track for and the 45 that Labor committed to. So the question is, if you've got the next COP, which is specifically saying we need more ambition, or we won't get there, there is a big amount of room for Australia to move between 26 and 45. So the question is whether Australia should be open to a more ambitious target.
Tom, once again, I'm a member of the Australian Parliament. I stand for the Australian people. I act in their interests. I do what they ask. We've put that proposition to them. They've accepted it. I'm sure as we move forward that the ministers who are involved in those assessments and certainly in those negotiations will put forward our country's views. But once again, we need to act in a way which doesn't destroy our own economy, particularly if those who are out there who are major economies, major contributors to emissions, are not making those changes, and that's detrimental to our economy and the people who we want to be employed, which is Australians.
Wanted to just get your reaction to a tweet as well from one of your colleagues, Andrew Laming, who tweeted, "Love how the inner city elite wet themselves when they see some smoke blows between them and the next high-rise apartment block. Perhaps next time vote for an MP that doesn't blacklist backburning and fire prevention measures." Is that a helpful tweet?
Well, look, Lamo's a bit of a character and he's entitled to put his views forward as everyone else. But, you know, what I would say to the people of Sydney, I mean, they've been badly affected by smoke haze now for some days. But a prevailing breeze off the coast for some time will blow that away, and I'm sure that many of them will then forget about what happens. But if you live in regional Australia, this is part of your everyday life. I can't remember a single year where I haven't been affected by smoke, wherever it is that I live, whether that's through fires or backburning or anything else. It is part of the landscape of where we choose to live. And I think that, you know, we just accept that as part of a normal working life. It's what we do about
levels for a couple of weeks or so?
Well, look, I can't answer that question. I just don't know. What I do know is it's been a very bad fire season. It started early. It's obviously very dry. But you reap what you sow. If you haven't done hazard reduction burns over the last 20 years because of state laws, well, clearly there is more fuel, it burns hotter, it burns faster, and it's far more dangerous to control. And as I said earlier, the things we need to do are the projects around resilience. How do we reduce that risk?
So just on that,
risk to life and property?
What New South Wales state laws should be changing as an example to do with, I'm assuming you mean hazard reduction, so what happens in the months before rather than the backburning sort of emergency procedure?
Hi, Tom, I'm talking about Queensland's vegetation laws, where the Queensland Labor government has prohibited clearing for landholders more than 20 metres from their property or from their structures without a development permit. I mean, we saw fires last year which were very bad up in Ken O'Dowd's area of Flynn. We saw correspondence from landholders who had been completely burned out, where they'd been trying to get permits for 2 and 3 years to do that hazard reduction control burn unsuccessfully. So once again, if things are moving in terms of our climate and increase in risk, then we need to do more around the resilience piece. That's just a common sense approach to what is the issue of the day.
Any similar issue in New South Wales?
Oh, look, I don't want to comment on New South Wales legislation. I don't know it as well as I do for Queensland. I know that the Queensland laws effectively prohibit clearing around fence lines. I think it's about a 20-metre zone around a fence line. If you have a fire that's 80 and 90 feet high and moving at 30 knots, you're not going to stop it with a 20 metres of clearance. So it is all this bureaucracy and red tape. But we need to ensure that we act to protect life and property. Local government's got a part to play too, Tom. They need to stop approving houses which are surrounded by trees a few feet away.
It is one of the things being put out there as another issue of management, and certainly a worthy conversation. We'll see what comes perhaps beyond the shorter-term emergency. I wanted to just ask you finally about the government commodity analyst from Aberes. It says cropping farmers over the past 20 years are making 35% less because of changes in climate. That must concern you, being from up there?
Tom, you don't have to be a genius to know you put out less product if there's a drought. You also have less profit if the price is down, or the exchange rate isn't right, or you didn't get sufficient rainfall or too much rainfall.
Okay, well,
all things just didn't work around the price of electricity.
This distinguishes from the impact of price, other factors on farms and climate variability. This is just changes in climate.
Well, it must look at climate variability. I mean, that's what happens. It is very unusual in agriculture that all of your ducks line up in one single season. It certainly didn't happen for me in over 10 years that I was involved. It's very rare that everything goes right, including price and weather and transport and getting your product off and getting it to market and actually getting paid. I mean, this is just part of agricultural life.
Again,
so yes, the climate
none of those,
directly...
all those factors are stripped out according to this analysis. This is the government commodity analyst. This is, you know, not just a think tank. All those factors are stripped out. They're saying changes in climate over that 2-decade period, 35% less. Are you saying you don't think this is any sort of trend?
Oh, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is I completely agree with the fact that if climate changes and it's detrimental, it affects profitability. I mean, that is just part of being in agriculture.
But are you saying variations in climate, or are you saying this is a continuing trend because of climate change, man-made climate change, and this is the new reality?
Tom, I've only read the media reports. I haven't read the full ABARES report. I have the utmost respect for ABARES. In fact, I've opened a couple of their conferences around the country previously when they're looking at forecasting for price. That's one of their primary roles, when they look at likely production and likely price forecasts, which is incredibly important for growers who are making decisions on the run about what to plant and when and what returns they may get. But as I said, the weather is an enormous part of what every single producer does in Australia. I mean, everybody is reliant on the weather for agriculture, whether it's too hot, too dry, too wet, too windy.
Of course the weather
it all has an effect.
Again, are you worried this could be a trend? That'd concern you if this were a trend, wouldn't it?
Tom, I'm always concerned about trends that affects agricultural producers. It's $60 billion worth of agricultural product in this country. The overwhelming majority, almost $50 billion, is exported. Export dollars for us means jobs, trade means jobs. And once again, it's important that we should note that Peru and Hong Kong and Indonesia have now been ratified for free trade agreements. That's another triple line result for the federal government on top of the other deals we've already done.
True. Again, as I said, this one strips out price. Anyway, I take what you say, that you haven't read the whole thing. Perhaps some summer reading for me and you, Keith Pitt, as we sit on... well, I might get to the beach, I'm not sure. Anyway, appreciate all your efforts and contributions through 2019. I must say, you always front up the good, the bad and the ugly. So Merry Christmas and enjoy the break.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tom. Can I just thank Sky and your producers, your entire team and all of your viewers for letting me put forward and having that opportunity to do that, to put forward the case for regional Australia. It's what I'm passionate about, and I'm sure we'll continue to support regional Australia into the future. Have a Merry Christmas and certainly a great time and a safe Christmas.